Hello everyone, this is Fionapollo and I do art commentary. And today's topic is going to revolve around what happens when fandoms get a bit too carried away or too rowdy in regards to their favourite media. So while it can seem like I don't agree with many aspects of fandom, I genuinely think fan spaces can be some of the most creative, welcoming, and open-minded communities to delve into a topic you enjoy, find friends, or just generally share your enthusiasm for something. I think that fandom can be a wonderful thing. I saw it as an escape for much of my youth and was able to use my admiration for certain shows and media as a jumping off point for how I developed not just things like my art skills, but also even life lessons and attitudes that became intrinsic to how I view certain aspects of the world. But sometimes people can take this enthusiasm a bit far, and this most definitely isn't unusual. Fanaticism is a pretty regular occurrence when something blows up in popularity, and for the most part it can be dealt with or ignored if it can be contained. We've seen this happen in many other instances other than just online fandom. Musicians also have this happen to them a lot, but it can still be a lot to deal with, and when that attention starts to turn negative, circumstances such as obsessiveness, rude behaviour, stalking, doxing, and even threats to life cannot and should not be tolerated in any form. These kinds of circumstances can also be different depending on if the topic in question revolves around a property made by a corporation or a single person. A lot of people like to excuse these actions and sweep them under the rug by saying, oh, that's just how the internet works, and if you're mature about it, you can just ignore it. But it's not, and that's not how it works, and you shouldn't treat it like that. It gives off very boys will be boys energy, you know? We've seen this pattern of behaviour happen many times before, regardless of that factor, but what that can affect is how severely and potentially dangerous it can be for individuals especially. So today I wanted to talk about it in relation to a property created by one person that has recently experienced a very rapid growth in recognition, and that is a curious little entity known as Welcome Home by Clown. I wanted to use this as a way to discuss how quickly fandoms can grow and end up developing their own corners of very dedicated fans who can sometimes act pretty volatile. I'll also be sprinkling in other examples, some pretty well-known examples at that, but Welcome Home will be the main focus because it's pretty recent. While I don't think this fandom is the worst, and it definitely wasn't helped that there were a few misconceptions about what the actual works were intended for, the speed at which Welcome Home shot up in popularity felt like a good way to discuss the fandom life cycle and how certain behaviours can manifest. And quite frankly, I just found the whole situation around it fascinating. And don't worry, from what I've read, Clown is absolutely fine. He actually just celebrated his birthday a little while ago, and Happy Birthday Clown even made it onto the trending page on Twitter. Even though I am going to talk about the potential negatives, I still want to acknowledge that some overwhelmingly good things can come from this too, and the support from a given community can often be vital to combating the more egregious side of these issues. I'm not saying that every fandom gets this bad either, it's just interesting when you start to see the more exuberant aspects come to light, and I don't think it's a bad idea to remind people every once in a while to evaluate just how intensely they might get caught up in something and, you know, remind them to rein it in if necessary, because some people do genuinely just get swept up in the hype. If you like what you're hearing, then please consider liking and subscribing. Do you know of any fandoms that are especially known for getting carried away with things like this? Do you think it's just something that happens on the internet? And do you think there's a way we can prevent, or at the least reduce it? Please let me know. Constructive feedback is very much appreciated here. Alright, let's begin. Part 1. The Fandom Life Cycle. Before we get into this section properly, I want to give some background on the media in particular that we're centering this discussion around. So to start us off, what is Welcome Home? Welcome Home is a horror project that revolves around the efforts of a group of dedicated restoration enthusiasts trying to uncover why this delightful little puppet show from the late 60s and early 70s was suddenly pulled from TV and more or less erased from existence. There was a bit of a misconception going around stating that the project was an ARG or alternate reality game, and quite a few people, including Clown himself, appear to be very confused as to how this idea came about. Clown himself has only really referred to it as a horror project, not a horror game. I think this is in part probably due to the interactive feel of the website, in addition to the fact that Welcome Home shows some very clear influences from puppet shows of the era such as Sesame Street, and I guess people weren't sure as to whether that meant that this narrative is supposed to take place in an alternate universe as a way to avoid copyright issues. The idea of it being an ARG anyway just spread like absolute wildfire, and we'll get into the implications of how easily information can fan out in a fandom later on, but nevertheless, the show was the sole production of a company known as the Playfellow Workshop, which coincidentally also left no trace of itself whatsoever. The plot focused on 9 neighbours, with the main star of the show being Wally Darling, an adorable, 3-foot-tall, easygoing fellow who lives in a sentient house called home, the final, unofficial neighbour of which the show's name is derived from. Almost all of the information regarding this project can be found on the website, which was supposedly created by the Welcome Home restoration team, who mysteriously received multiple pieces of lost media surrounding the show contained in bright brightly coloured envelopes. These pieces have been carefully restored and reconstructed to the point where an exhibitor, only referred to as the question answerer, has approached the team after discovering the website with a proposition to showcase the team's findings to the general public. As you dig deeper though, you start to notice things that seem a little off, such as letters being formatted incorrectly, hidden text that can be read through highlighting, and it also seems that one of the characters appears to be talking to the viewer through the site itself, and the guestbook makes it almost impossible to guess otherwise that this is Wally's doing. Except, is it just Wally? I'm not going to go into any game theories here, by the way. This is just going to be a super quick rundown. Game Theory recently made a fantastic video theorizing some of the tidbits of information available on the site, which I will leave a link to below. The website has ended up becoming such a hit that Clown has gained over 100,000 followers on Twitter in a very short amount of time. Countless fan videos have been made on TikTok looking into the secrets and puzzles of the website. People have been making fan videos, animations, OCs, and honestly, it's pretty amazing to witness this project be so well received by so many people so quickly, especially when judging by the sheer detail put into setting the scene for what's going on, as well as the skill of the artworks Clown has made. You can really feel the love that's been put into it, and I think that's why so many people have gravitated to it with such an eagerness to learn more about all of these charming characters and the world they inhabit. I mean, just the website and the artworks are a feat in of themselves, but photos of a real-life model of home itself has been shared, and even an entire real-life Wally puppet has been made too. Clown really has gone above and beyond with this, and I am just bowing down to all of it because this is the exact level of dedication I wish I could give to my projects if I wasn't so damn tired all the time. Also, FYI, my favourite is Frank. He's just a wee little smarty pants who loves butterflies. How could anyone not find that super sweet? Like, come on. He's adorable. I love Frank. Frank is my child now. However, this sudden rush of popularity doesn't come easy, and Clown was understandably quite overwhelmed with all of the attention, both positive and negative at first, and has been on hiatus while he both adjusts to all of this newfound attention, but also to work on creating and rolling out the next batch of website updates. Clown has been online on and off to thank fans and give small updates regarding progress on Welcome Home, and also on how he's doing generally. And he also has this very particular way of typing that kind of adds to the enthusiasm around his creation that makes it feel like he's also playing a character, and just, I just love it. I love when people are passionate about the things they make, when they just go all in with it. It just sparks joy. It makes me so happy. I honestly love this creation. I love what Clown is doing. But anyway, that's our current rundown of what Welcome Home is. I don't want to give too much of it away since I want people to go and do their own bit of investigating once the website is back up. But now I want to delve into how I interpret the typical fandom life cycle. When a fandom starts to draw people in, the project is more than likely still developing and forming the identity to which people will be able to latch onto more strongly later on. As we've already said, a substantial amount of work gets put into any moderately scaled project, to the point where it can take years before any of it actually gets shown to the public, and even longer for that to receive a substantial amount of positive reception. In Welcome Home's case, none of the art or technicality or lore found on the website could have been achieved in a single day or a week or a month or anything like that. It's all built up over a certain amount of time. From what I've heard, the website had already been in production for a few years before it was published, and not only that, things don't become popular immediately. Welcome Home's website has actually been live since February 2022, so why is it only a year later that it started to gain such massive traction? Well, a lot of the time, the beginnings of a fandom are down to a small but dedicated pool of fans who take pride in being along for the ride from the very beginning. The people who see the potential and spark lurking beneath and want to indulge and encourage this new creative venture. These people are vital in encouraging the creator to keep going, even when the gains seem small at first. So when the property does continue to develop its qualities and draws in more and more people, those original fans are bolstering all of this support and are also reveling in all of the "I was here first" bravado. And who can blame them, you know? We all want to be a part of something. After that, it only takes enough people to talk about something, or more specifically, the right kind of people with the correct algorithm to get the word out quickly and have the fandom swell dramatically. The very first place that I saw anything to do with Welcome Home was, of course, on TikTok. And if anyone knows how TikTok's algorithm works, if you watch even just one video all the way through regarding it, then it starts to bombard you with hundreds more. So all of a sudden, people are seeing videos made of Welcome Home that on their own are pretty sparse, but on individuals' For You pages end up seeming like way more because of the nature of TikTok's algorithm. And all of a sudden, everyone wants to see more of this newfound thing that's been flooding everyone's feeds. It's honestly fascinating and exciting and terrifying all at the same time because, oh my god, so many people are looking at what I made, but also, oh my god, so many people are looking at what I made. That was how I first felt anyway, and I'm gonna imagine Clown and many others feel the same when something they make randomly gets a ton of attention. Fan content has and will continue to always play a very critical role in any fandom. It's where people will come up with theories, make animatics, draw fan art, record fandubs, write fanfiction, and so on. And this also really helps to keep people intrigued and bolster the original content offered by the creator. As Welcome Home rose to prominence, understandably people were excited to be around for the next update. But the thing is, with something that has clearly taken such effort and care in it, that's not going to come at the snap of a few fingers. In fact, Clown has mentioned recently that the website is being temporarily taken down to undergo some refurbishment. It takes a long time to put assets together and present them coherently, especially on something interactive like a functioning website. But as the creator toils away to create new material and people are left to their own devices, this is typically when we start to see fandoms begin to form niche little communities within the main fandom umbrella to occupy their time and explore different aspects of the theme and the characters in ways that appeal to their specific palette. A lot of the time this is all good and harmless, but you also have those who, kind of forget that sometimes you don't need to post certain things on the internet. It's not uncommon for edgy or inappropriate works to be created when something gets popular, but the kind of works being made surrounding Welcome Home went directly and very heavily against the wishes of the creator. And even though this is actually quite common, I feel like it does highlight how the distinction between a corporate property versus individual can have the most negative impact on the individual. Corporations typically don't care what people do with the creations they make, so long as it generates intrigue and drives up sales without damaging its reputation enough to impact those factors. All press is good press, or, so the saying goes. If a drawing of Lara Croft nude is going to generate more buzz and revenue around the Tomb Raider games, they're not going to say anything about it. But when it comes to an individual's personal work, such as with Welcome Home, which bear in mind, the Welcome Home cast have been described as Clown's comfort characters, and there was no way anyone could have predicted the project would blow up the way that it has. There is just a really callous disregard from a small group of people regarding the fact that a real person is behind this property. Individual people are obviously going to be a lot more precious about a creation that they have cultivated with little to no outside help, and they shouldn't be berated or mocked for having that kind of connection to their works, since that connection is likely what drew other people in the first place. People have been asked to try and dial it back with the NSFW pieces of the characters in particular, since that's always kind of been a taboo subject even in fandom way in the beginning, but somehow this ends up happening anyway. Just because you can do something doesn't exactly mean that you should, but quite often a small section of the people creating these pieces that go against certain creators' wishes are already fully aware of this, and that's kind of why they're doing it. They want to get under people's skin because they find it fun. Some people are just weird. But something I want to point out with this, because people seem to believe that this is a direct result of how quickly fandom culture has kind of enveloped Welcome Home, and is also a symptom of fandom culture developing and dying quicker these days, is that this perfectly lines up with the first big peak of a fandom's popularity in my experience. And most of it is honestly people getting all of the weirdness out of their systems. That doesn't make it right, considering it made the creator uncomfortable, but the current hype around Welcome Home and the inherent newness of the story and characters in people's minds means that there will be undoubtedly an initial exploration of absolutely anything and everything to do with it, even if a lot of that will feel very far removed from the creator's original intentions. But regardless, this is indeed something that happens, and even though it feels like the fandom is developing at a breakneck pace and spiraling a bit out of control, it's not unlike other fandoms we've seen in the past, including Steven Universe, Voltron, and even indie creations like Homestuck. Oh my god, Homestuck was a beast. And eventually, once people have shaken out of the initial cocoon of intrigue they've developed, it will eventually plateau and balance itself out, trust me. With that said, oh my god, I did not mean to talk this much, but speaking of other fandoms, let's break away from Welcome Home for a bit and explore past examples of these kinds of fan bases. Part 2. History is a circle. So while Welcome Home is obviously a horror project with cultish, sinister undertones, it is also based around a children's puppet show, which means that a lot of the content surrounding that aspect of it specifically is very cheerful and wholesome and champions the messages of compassion and friendship and community. And what's interesting is that a lot of big fandoms also tend to grow around such properties that also place those values at the core of their creative context. The edginess surrounding the horror aspect also massively appeals to fans because that seems to be an angle that's really popular online because it can appeal to both sides. The people who want to indulge in the more wholesome side can focus on that, and vice versa for the edgelords. But taking Welcome Home out of the equation for a moment, I want to give my thoughts on how seemingly innocent shows that showcase such values can feel like they breed some of the most aggressive and downright brutal fan bases online. It's really weird because when you look at a lot of these fandoms, most of them tend to be for shows or media properties that preach about caring for one another and just generally being a good person, right? But even despite that, it almost seems like the more wholesome a show's message tries to be, the more rabid a fan fandom grows around it, and we have a ton of examples for this. There's honestly quite a bit of background to this in my opinion, and for the most part, I think a chunk of it stems from progressions made in what we can actually show in media now, as well as the overwhelming influence of organised advocacy online. Themes of loving people no matter who they are, for example, have developed in recent times to more explicitly include minorities such as the LGBTQ community, people of colour, disabled people, and so on. Honestly, I think the problem with these fandoms is that because they want to emulate those messages in some way but don't fully know how to on a collective scale, because everyone's standards and morals are going to be different, this ends up morphing into a kind of warped version of virtue signalling. What also ends up being a factor is that most fandoms consist of young fans who are immersed in the latest popular media, so even if we identify the problem, it's just going to keep happening as new generations and media properties keep getting introduced into fandom culture. It almost feels like an unbreakable cycle. If you're getting all of your moral values from media properties that can only tackle one or two of these messages of goodwill and doing the right thing at a time, it doesn't really leave room for more complex versions of those discussions. And a good chunk of people won't know how to tackle them, so instead of communicating and connecting the dots organically, people end up clashing. Back in the late 2000s to mid-2010s, this was especially bad. People were deadly serious about defending their favourite show's integrity, and even though that still happens a lot today, somehow it felt more intense back then, which I think is in part due to the rise of streaming and the sheer variety of shows out there now. When there weren't as many shows and you had like the bigwigs from certain channels such as like, Steven Universe and stuff like that, it meant that more people were hyperfixating on the same shows for longer periods of time. So these things felt like they were left to fester for longer. If you're into Steven Universe, for example, then you're probably aware that the show was a bit of a trendsetter for things such as inclusive character designs back in 2013 to 2016. And if you were in the fandom around that time, you may have heard of quite a few different scandals where individuals were bullied for failing to meet the same standards of inclusivity in their own works. One such incident had a fan be viciously harassed because they drew Rose Quartz, a visibly fat character in the show, as being slightly skinnier, and this abuse went so far as to cause the artist to try and take their own life. The attempt failed, thankfully, but this is a prime example of just how heated these things can get. Another example of how this can go awry is when the creators are thrown into the mix. I know that back in the day, and not so much anymore, the creators of popular media were treated like idols. Lauren Faust, the creator of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, for example, had a very uncontested authority in the show's fandom, and it was actually kind of terrifying. But there is one factor that can very negatively impact the creator and sour the media experience for everyone, and that is when people start to realise that creators are not these almighty gods who can do no harm, but are just regular human beings who make honest mistakes and can't live up to these impossible standards set by their fans. So some fans tend to become very cold or demanding towards people creating their media when they start to fall from that podium. Going back to people waiting around while the crew or creator are busy, people can be very impatient and become quite antsy or even rude if they are invested enough in seeing something through to completion. Something big with this is that during this time, it can sometimes become an issue that since a lot of fandom information is shared by word of mouth, this can end up working like a game of telephone, and completely inaccurate accounts and details of something can become gospel in any given fandom. I'm kind of using Steven Universe as a big source of examples here because I just remember a lot of it, but there was a fan account on Tumblr at the time when new episodes were being released that would post random quote-unquote facts about the show, and this blog was extremely popular and influential, but it did also post a lot of things that straight up just weren't true. At one point, when we finally got a glimpse of Garnet and Pearl's fusion, Sardonyx, in the show, this blog for whatever reason decided to tell a bunch of people that their name was actually Citrine. It seems like such a harmless thing because it was, but hundreds of people believed it, and it sparked so many vicious arguments that it was kind of unbelievable. But that's the kind of power a renowned entity within a fandom can have. They can spread false information very quickly and very easily because people are eager to consume all of this knowledge about their favourite thing. If it was anything else, like say for example, joking around that the creator lives at a randomly picked address somewhere in America, that could put the actual people who live at that address to the mercy of a bunch of people online who think it's hilarious to harass them while believing, or even just pretending to believe, that someone they know of lives there. Which again, actually happened in Steven Universe after the Keystone Motel episode dropped and people started to review bomb the real life Keystone Motel the episode was based around. Yeah, the SU fandom was pretty wild. And not always in the best way. What can also be a problem is if fandom culture ends up creating certain expectations about what they expect to see come from the media itself, and when it doesn't deliver, oh, it's just terrible. One massive example is in the Voltron fandom, when season 3 was teased to a select group of people, but somehow a person was able to leak unreleased footage to the general public. When the crew politely asked them to stop, the person responsible for the leaks demanded that the crew make a popular ship of the time, Clance, which consisted of the red and blue Voltron members or paladins, Keith and Lance, entirely canon. This never happened in the show, by the way. It was teased for a while that Lance would get a chance to showcase some LGBT rep in the show, and the crew did manage to do that in the end, happened in some form with the Black Paladin Shiro instead, but the fanbase came out of it feeling like they had still been massively queer-baited. Also, something worthy to note, it was not the crew's decision to omit these themes with Lance just to annoy fans and bait them into watching the whole series, because it was the decision of the executives at DreamWorks who had the final say on things. The crew were powerless in that situation, and blaming them for it achieves nothing. They were the ones who were fighting to have it in there and are the reason we got gay Shiro, so be grateful. But what happens in these instances is that people who are indulging a bit too much in the virtue signaling behavior made it really difficult for others in the fandom to create anything without worrying about having to consider it from 100 different angles, unless they would be mocked and harassed relentlessly for not living up to other people's standards within the fandom. After all of this happened, what would then start to occur is that people felt more inclined to push back against this perceived holier-than-thou behavior, which is where the famous phrase, "just let people enjoy things," started to be applied to more than just having an interest in a kids show or having an embarrassing hobby. It was now being used as this kind of get-out-of-jail-free card when it felt like people were virtue signaling a bit too much. Only problem with that is that, again, people went a bit too far with it, and now we have people saying, let people enjoy things, about stuff that can sometimes border on being illegal. And this line of thinking even extended to the creators when they tried to speak on it if they felt that people were taking things too far, and some would react by doubling down and going on the offensive even against the people making their favourite media. Hell, up until recently, Steven Universe had been absolutely trashed on for seemingly any grievance people had, and this even extended to the creator Rebecca Sugar being on the receiving end too. At one point, it was actually reported that Rebecca Sugar had bought a house in LA and people went so far as to dox where she lived. I don't really feel like I should have to tell people that this is unacceptable and disgusting behaviour, most of you know that, but I'm going to say it anyway because it needs to be said. No matter how much you hate something or someone, do not put normal people who make things in danger. What is wrong with you? This was also a perceived concern with Welcome Home too, where it was rumoured that Clown had been doxed as well, but thankfully he managed to clear up that it wasn't true. But still, my point still stands. Sometimes a fandom just gets so big that you literally cannot put any kind of cap on what is being made, spoken about, or how certain individuals choose to conduct themselves. Does it suck? Yes, it sucks massively and I hate it. But the point I'm trying to make is that we have seen these patterns of behaviour time and again, and I don't want people worrying that this is a sign of the end times, because it isn't. People aren't getting worse. It's always kind of a pattern, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to find solutions for it. I don't know what those solutions are because I don't know. I just genuinely don't know. But I feel like a good step is to at least talk about it, which is why I'm here. But by that same token, this is just an explanation, not an excuse for people's behaviour. If you see people doing all of this stuff, don't just sweep it under the rug, please. You have a report button and a block button for a reason. If people are getting carried away to the point where individuals are being put at risk, then that needs to be nipped in the bud. No ifs, no ands, and no buts. But anyway, small ranty PSA aside, let's keep it moving and go on to our final section. Part 3. Everything in moderation. All in all, people need to chill out, like seriously. Please calm down. Look, people have lives and things take time to be made to the standard that some fans have come to expect, and we just have to accept that, okay? Some people can become really intense and fall down a rabbit hole of believing that they are the authority on fandom, or that they're owed something by being a loyal fan or for supporting a project, but that is most definitely not how things work. No one owes anyone anything, and while it's nice to feel appreciated, we're all just strangers with our own lives, doing our own things, and sometimes that recognition isn't or shouldn't be a priority. And some people just kind of hang around as the bystanders of a community. I know sometimes people feel bad about just lurking without engaging or creating anything, but that's an important part of fandom too. Quite often it's the bulk of it. As for Welcome Home, Clown is still on hiatus, and the website is still down to my knowledge. But when it goes back up, there will be more things to explore, and I am very excited to be able to see it all alongside so many other people and just revel in the sheer excitement of it all. It's been a while since I've seen so many people be so enthusiastic about something like this, and what I've spoken about here is more so just a cautionary tale as opposed to trying to make people feel bad for enjoying something. But everything in life is a balance. So long as you are courteous with Clown, or any creator for that matter, as well as with others, respect their wishes, and don't try to assert yourself as the oracle of knowledge in a fandom, you're good, okay? Don't worry about it. While it's good to have passion and drive to go to bat for something, fandom is not the end-all, be-all, or the centre of the universe. It's a finite thing that many people glide in and out of, and it's okay to let things go even if you don't agree with people about how a character should be depicted or characterised, or if the creator chooses to go in a direction you don't like. None of this is the end of the world, and life would be much easier if we could all try to remember this. Common decency also isn't dead, and if someone says that they're uncomfortable with something, especially especially if it's something as justified as Clown being made uncomfortable by the Tumblr sexy manification of Wally, then I don't know, maybe people should listen to him about his own creation. Welcome Home isn't a corporate IP, and it shouldn't be treated as such just because it's popular. What are you all going to do if he suddenly decides he doesn't want to do this anymore? We will have scared off a fantastic creator, and this is why we can't have nice things. It is his creation, and he gets to decide what to do with it. We're all just here for the ride, and you can jump off at any time. But anyway, I do get it to an extent. I get carried away with stuff all the time, but that's okay. Just catch yourself when you can, and so long as no one is being hurt, just remember to have fun. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Is there anything you would like to add? Any fandom horror stories you want to share? Please let me know. I kinda need to lie down because it's hay fever season and I thought I was dying earlier this week, so I'll see you in the next one, okay? Stay safe, everyone. Bye!